So, following up on last week's conversation about, realism, and impressionism, and sort of the goals of the impressionists, which, as we were discussing, are, the pursuit of beauty through the relationships of colors and angles and things like that, as we see them before us. And this question, actually, from Kaya, is a logical follow-on to that one. I didn't think we had time to feed it into the same day, so let's try it for it today. I'll give you the question. I'll read you the question. To what extent can Impressionism invent, reinvent, or exaggerate what's in front of them? And I think you already know my answer based on last week's, if you were listening to that part of it. But now that I look at Monet's painting, some of the colors look beyond real. I also imagine painters rearranging what they see in nature so that it makes a better picture on their canvas. Now that's and so he's saying, please shed some light. I appreciate the double entendre there, the pun. The Impressionists love shedding light. But Kaya, thank you for the question. The several actually. So let's see if I can just do this one point at a time and make sure we don't make sure we sort of adequately cover each of them. But to what extent can Impressionists invent, reinvent, or exaggerate what's in front of them? What I'm going to say, if you've been paying attention to the Boston School conversation, is paint straight and true like a Christian, quoting de Camp, quoting Tarbell saying, all I want to do is make one like before I die, something like that. It was always this question of like and more like, and it does sound monotonous, like, what, I'll just get out a camera and just try to make it like, or something like that. When you get to the discussion of, from Gamel, which is worth looking at, where he has, I think, 2 full chapters dedicated to, maybe 3, to the academic versus the impressionists. Way worth your time to read that book. Find it somewhere. I think it's probably online by now. The Twilight of Painting came out before I was born. But what you're going to see is this discussion about interpretation. And so it puts a whole lot of things into people's minds about what we're doing out there. Are we interpreting something, some feeling we have through nature or something like that? Or are we, to what extent are we actually using nature to convey ourselves? Well, that's a valid point, providing what we mean by conveying is the sensation of something we received through what we saw in front of us. And so inventing, reinventing, what was the other word? Exaggerating. They're problematic terms to a person who's actually found poetry in front of them. What you're really looking for as an impressionist is to capture that which you found. And in other words, you found a beauty, you find yourself in love with it, and you put your time into putting those relationships into that form that you say, yes, that conveys what I saw. And then you hold it up, shall we say, to the world to see. And do you see it? Do you see it? That's it. That's what I meant, right? Now, the impressionist does, like everybody else, wind up with a less than complete statement. I mean, the hyperrealist, that's my term, is a guy that crosses T's and dots I's of the infinite atoms on the eyeball of a mosquito. That is not what we're meaning to be saying about any art form. When you're an impressionist, it's not just drawing endlessly the relationships of every tiny little thing, but it actually is about conveying what you found to be lovely, to be beautiful, to be true, and to do it with all diligence. And so my recommendation to anybody studying painting, for sure, is to just ignore the idea that you have anything like what it takes to do exaggeration or invention or reinvention of nature until maybe you spent 50 years in front of her, or some good number of years. And even then, you do it with a whole lot of trepidation. I often say to students, and you've heard me say it probably here, but if you chose that spot, bring it. But don't choose that spot and then start changing it. It means you chose a spot that is fairly inadequate, either as a composition or a color scheme or something else. And it's not that difficult to actually find. It shouldn't be difficult once you know what you're doing a little bit. you can find an essential beauty, a good composition simultaneous with beautiful color and all those things, wonderful light distribution, all those things that give general pleasure. And then, as I said before, though, the real question is, can you bring the music? Can you draw forth the poetry that we referred to in that last one? Again, read Velasquez by R.A.M. Stevenson. So that's the beginning of that point, and it keeps turning, everything keeps turning around that point. So that he's making his point. He says, now that I look at Monet's paintings, some of the colors look beyond real. I've actually looked at Monet my entire life. I would say that once you're experienced with allowing the entire color relation world to come before you, and by the way, if you stand back at his viewing distance, you will see that he was remarkably true. I mean, they feel like the light of every day that you've ever walked in, at least if you've walked in that area of France. Or not even, but the sense of truth of the relationships is quite staggering, and I find it not possible. Now there are some of those where his eyes were going and stuff, where he did some really weird things, and which people want to take as a takeoff point for some modernist extravaganzas or exaggerations or whatever. But once he gets his eyes back, it's not happening anymore. No, I think not. But when you come up too close to any painting, you'll see things that will look like that. They'll look like exaggerated notes. Like if you're looking at a group of trees or something like that, with atmospheric shadows and all sorts of things, you may be saying to yourself, if you're looking at it simultaneously with looking at a Monet painting of the same thing, you may be saying to yourself, I don't see those bright reds in there. But if you're standing back at the right distance, which is crucial in an Impressionist work. In other words, it's not just the viewing, not just where the artist stood in relation to nature itself, but it's where the artist stood in relation to his painting. And it's only true there from that distance. I remember as a student having the sort of ghastly experience of coming back from looking at a Rembrandt at the museum, at the Gardner Museum in Boston, coming back and telling the students that there were two different perspectives. There's something seriously wrong with that painting. And I think it's one of the missing ones. And now, and then I went back a number of times later, and I started changing my position on the floor, and I finally found out exactly where he painted it from. Well, this isn't necessarily a perspective problem in a Monet painting. Now it's a question of keeping back the right distance, because he's trying to get live color even into the shadows, where most people see nothing. And so when he's trying to get a fully chromatic shadow color, shall we say, he's finding he has to use chromatic notes, but he still wants it to basically look like blue X. You know what I mean? So the unity of it to become blue X is a product of broken color in his particular case. And that broken color is going to come up, by the way. I think I'll bring it up in the very next one of these talks from Keith. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. I think it is Keith, actually. And then, by the way, right after that, I'll try to get to two of yours, Jack. I'll be you're on my horizon. I hope I'm probably pushing you back a little bit. I don't mean to be, but anyway. So, for now, I have no reason to do that in particular, except that these things have their own trails of thought. So then he says, I also imagine painters rearranging what they see in nature so that it makes a better picture on their canvas. Please shed some light. And again, I suggest to you that once you finally begin to fully understand composition, you won't pick a spot where you have to rearrange stuff. Yes, if you walk out in nature and you start painting away and suddenly you realize, this is not very good composition, you'll have to move stuff. But what kind of an approach is that? Do you go out there, and by the way, go out there and find a really good spot and then really bring it, But looking through your viewfinders, your classic sort of frame, find out what the major elements are visually and what the distribution of that is and what the main line is and all those things that conform to the idea of what a good composition is comprised of. And then bring it, then really bring it. I remember, I think I've mentioned before, that we had with Gamel a moment where one of the students was painting something and he started falsifying a note because he said, it's too strong, it doesn't look good in the picture. And Gamel's comment to him was, paint it the way it looks, you need those relationships. we'll see about that at the end. We'll see at the end if we in fact want to adjust it. And that's a pretty fair way to deal with it, right? People make these decisions too early in a picture. Go ahead and put the thing down on the canvas when you can see it in a two-dimensional rectangle. You'll have a far better idea whether something needs to be done. So those various things are the things I've come from, that have come to me through experience. Don't be too ambitious to change nature. Be ambitious to understand what it's up to and to find places that actually compose well. It takes a world of learning, and composition is definitely one of those things that really wants us to have it in hand as we go outdoors. I think that's the greatest risk of plein air painters. They go out there and plein air paint from the very first day. I say risk. I don't think that's really I don't want to put them in a different category from everybody else. But it's so easy not to have a good composition because of your lack of understanding of composition. So, and I've done plenty, but as you spend your life searching out the very nature of composition, you will do better at selecting spots. So, yeah, I'm not sure I'd trust my first instincts as a young student at the very least of painting. So I think that let's see, yeah. So that's the light I have to shed. So I hope you can enjoy that. And thank you, Kaya, for that question. I think your name is Kaya. So I put you down as Kaya, so that's why your name's going to show up. But his name is Kaya, too, from one of the, at the bottom of one of the comment sections on YouTube. Anyway, one more time, subscribe, share, whatever all those points are, like. And thank you very much. I'll see you next time.